Every week, so much happens in your own country that it's often hard to keep track of the news at home, let alone around the world. So the Global Summary is your weekly rundown of the biggest news events from around the world. In the next 8 minutes, I'm going to walk you through some of the week's biggest news, but we'll be moving fast. So if you want to find out more about any of the topics we discussed today, there are article recommendations in the description for deeper reading. This week's biggest stories include Hungary's new vaccination strategy, which breaks away from the EU, the new political party who dominated El Salvador's recent election, and a potential cure for one of the world's biggest killers. And no, I'm not talking about COVID this time. Before we start though, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel, and ring the bell icon to be notified every time we put out a new global news video. Also, if you like summaries like this, you should check out the Daily Briefing, where we summarise 3 of the biggest news stories every day. You can find the video version of that over on the TLDR Daily YouTube channel, link below. You can listen to the podcast by searching in your favourite podcast app, or read the newsletter by signing up below. Thank you so much for your support. We talk about this every week, but that's because there are a few news events as impactful or important right now as what's going on in Myanmar. A month ago now, a military junta took control of the country, overthrowing leader Aung San Suu Kyi because of an unproven theory that the country's elections had been rigged. Since then, Suu Kyi was arrested for possession of illegal communications devices, walkie-talkies, and subsequently she wasn't seen for approaching a month. That was until she faced trial for new charges, including breaching COVID-19 restrictions during the election, and causing fear and alarm. Suu Kyi attended the trial via video link and, according to her lawyers, appeared to be in good health. In the month since she was last seen though, things certainly haven't cooled down in the country, with protests continuing and violence between the military and protesters worsening. Sunday was the deadliest day of protesting thus far, with officials reporting 18 deaths, and others on the ground suspecting the real number might be higher. With protests continuing to ramp up and more charges being levelled against Suu Kyi, this isn't likely to settle down anytime soon. I feel like we cover this topic in every episode of the Global Summary, but if you want us to do a deep dive into the issue and explain it in depth all in one place, then like this video and comment below and we'll make a full explainer on the topic. We've gone a whole story without mentioning it, so it's inevitable that we have to come back to COVID. This weekend saw Hungary break away from their EU partners, importing vaccines from outside of the official EU procurement scheme. That's not all that major, but the big news is that while Hungary is actually getting more vaccines from the EU than some other countries, and has pretty large stockpiles left over, they've decided to import Chinese and Russian vaccines. These jabs haven't been approved by Europe's regulator and aren't officially sanctioned, marking a significant shift away from the European consensus. Hungary's Prime Minister, who received the Chinese shot on Sunday, clearly thinks they're important though, remarking that if we didn't have the Russian and Chinese vaccines, we would be in big trouble. Orban's not the only leader to get vaccinated this week though, with Modi also getting inoculated. His jab was Covaxin though, an Indian-developed vaccine. After the injection, Modi tweeted his praise of the healthcare system in India, encouraging others to follow in his footsteps. This is a message that not all will welcome though, with vaccine skepticism seemingly on the rise. A recent poll in the US found that 1 in 3 Americans either definitely or probably won't get the vaccine. The most commonly cited reason is concern about side effects, while others want to wait and see if it's safe, don't trust the government, or don't believe that they need it. If you too are concerned, then check out our video where we explain vaccine safety and the regulation process. It's linked down below. Now, let's talk about 2 recent elections, one in Niger and another in El Salvador. Let's start with Niger, where many hoped that the first democratic transition of power would take place since the country gained independence in 1960. However, since winning the February 21st runoff election, things haven't exactly gone smoothly for Mohamed Bazoum. He's yet to be inaugurated, but there's already significant unrest in the country, which has led to at least 2 deaths. The country, which is all too used to coups, could be at risk of democracy failing once again, so we'll have to keep you updated on the situation as it plays out. Over in El Salvador, a brand new party, the New Ideas Party, looks to have blown the establishment FMLN and Arena parties out of the water, picking up 56 out of 84 seats. Despite only being formed in 2018, the party appears to have won a supermajority, allowing the Prime Minister to choose new Supreme Court justices and an Attorney General without the need to negotiate with opposition parties. Bukele's party seemed to have succeeded on a message of tackling corruption and gangs, as well as his personal charisma and media savvy. Some are worried though, accusing him of authoritarian tendencies, something which could be facilitated by his newfound supermajority. Speaking of global leaders, you might remember us discussing Italy's former Prime Minister Giuseppe Conte in another episode of the Global Briefing. Conte stood down from his position as Prime Minister last month, following the collapse of his governing coalition. But it seems that there's no love lost, with him agreeing to lead the relaunch of one of those coalition parties, the Five Star Movement. In what's being described as a refounding project, Conte is set to become the de facto leader of the party. Founded on an anti-establishment message, the Five Star Movement has disappointed some of their supporters, entering into coalitions with a number of major parties and diminishing their anti-establishment principles. So the hope is that under Conte's leadership, the party can regain some of their spark, become a more credible centrist party, and take on the Italian right who lead in the polls heading towards the 2023 election. Ultimately, we'll have to update you on how successful he ends up being. Another world leader who hit the news in recent weeks was Sarkozy, but the former French president didn't necessarily make the front pages for such positive reasons. On Monday, Sarkozy was sentenced to 3 years in jail for corruption. That's because, in 2014, following him leaving office, Sarkozy attempted to bribe a judge, telling him that he'd be given a prestigious job in return for information about a case. This isn't the end of troubles for Sarkozy though, with him set to go to trial again next month over a situation where he's been accused of breaking spending limits in his failed 2012 presidential campaign. On top of that, he's also being investigated for links to Libya's former leader Gaddafi, who may have helped fund the French politician's electoral campaign. Finally, in some good news, it seems that the RNA technology, which has allowed scientists to quickly develop COVID vaccines, could be used to help with the development of a malaria vaccine. Despite this mosquito-carried virus killing over 40,000 people every year, there's currently no vaccine against it. However, with scientists applying for a patent for an RNA-based vaccine, many hope that the new technology could help them avoid the issues which have made it so difficult in the past to create a malaria vaccine. Despite never having been tested on humans, one investor in the project commented that it produced probably the highest level of protection that's ever been seen in a mouse model. So there are really good signs for optimism. Those were some of the biggest global news stories from the last week. If 8 minutes wasn't enough, then there's links to further reading in the description. And if you think we missed anything, then comment below the stories you'd like to see us cover in future episodes. Also, as I said at the start, make sure to check out the daily briefing for daily news summaries from TLDR. The channel, podcast, and newsletter are all linked below. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel and ring the bell icon to be notified every time we release new global content. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. And if you want to see your name at the end of videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.